Ethan froze, his gaze locked on his wife, Amelia. Her eyes, blazing with anger, held him captive. Ethan, you are not going. Amelia, Maya is seriously ill. Her mother is frantic. She begged me to bring her back to the States. His voice was laced with frustration. Doesn't she have any other family or friends? Why you? Amelia's voice rose to a shout. Amelia, please be reasonable. We're from the same country, and we're her friends. Friends? Ethan, she's your friend, isn't she? No, she's more than just your friend. She's your first love. After 7 years of marriage, are you tired of me? Have you suddenly remembered how wonderful she is? Amelia, enough. It's over between Maya and me. She's in trouble, and as a friend, shouldn't I help her? That's rich. Most people want to stay far away from their exes, but you're practically throwing yourself at her. Did you forget she cheated on you? After all these years, you still remember the good times? Her voice dripped with sarcasm. Ethan watched her agitation, rubbing his temples. They'd never fought, not throughout their entire relationship, and now this. Maya. It seemed so trivial. He chose silence, letting her vent. Tears finally spilled down Amelia's cheeks. She stepped forward, burying her face in his chest. Ethan, please don't go. She knew he loved her, that he was devoted to their family, but the thought of him reconnecting with his first love, even for a brief visit, was unbearable. The near pleading in his wife's voice pierced him. Amelia, he finally conceded, I won't go. Relief washed over Amelia. Let her be selfish, just this once. This man was hers, and no one would take him away. The next day went by as usual, but that evening, Ethan's call filled her with dread. Amelia. Yes? A pause. Then, Amelia, we had an emergency admission. I'll be at the hospital all week. Her mind went blank. Okay, she managed, take care of yourself. Amelia, I'll take a few days off after this, and we'll do something together, he said softly. Okay. I'll wait for you. She hung up before he could say anything else. Staring at the rush hour traffic, a sudden impulse seized her. She hailed a cab. Airport, please. And hurry. Less than an hour later, she burst through the airport doors and raced towards international departures. Scanning the crowds, she spotted him. He held a boarding pass, walking towards the gate. The screen flashed, New York. She stood frozen. Ethan called every night that week, but Amelia didn't answer. Then came the celebration dinner for a successful project at work. The team moved on to karaoke. Amelia, numb from the suppressed emotions of the past week, drank more than usual. A song played, If time could truly rewind, I'd return to the tenderness we once knew. If you haven't forgotten our past love, please come back to me. A sharp pang hit her. Could Ethan and Maya? 7 years of marriage, and still no children. A constant ache for Ethan, who longed to be a father. The air thickened around her. She excused herself and stumbled towards the restroom. Staring at her reflection, Amelia felt a wave of despair. What if something happened between them? Amelia, are you okay? Jenna, a younger colleague, emerged from a stall. Just a little dizzy, Amelia forced a smile. Come on, let's dance. It's more fun than sitting in there. Jenna pulled her towards the dance floor. Amelia let herself be dragged along, a faint smile playing on her lips. Jenna's youthful energy was infectious. At 30-something, her own life felt consumed by work and the silent pressure of their childless marriage. Amelia, you're a great dancer. Jenna exclaimed. These old bones can still move, Amelia chuckled. You're not old. Ask David. Jenna gestured towards their team leader, who had joined them. Amelia turned, offering a polite smile. David. Not at work, Amelia. Call me David. He returned her smile. Jenna persisted. Isn't she young, David? David looked at Amelia, a genuine warmth in his eyes. Jenna's right. You're very young. Their compliments temporarily lifted her spirits. You're both so sweet. I may not be young, but you make me feel it. As the song ended, Amelia excused herself, ignoring Jenna's calls. She found a quiet booth and ordered a drink. Why are you sitting here alone? David slid into the booth beside her, signaling for a drink. Too loud in there. Needed some quiet. Mind if I join you? He looked at her, his eyes sparkling. You're already here, David. Hard to kick you out now. She rolled her eyes playfully. Just being polite, he grinned. They talked for a long time. When the others finally emerged, they rejoined the group. Outside, people called cabs and arranged rides. As the crowd thinned, Amelia hailed a taxi. Amelia, I'll give you a ride. David stood behind her. You're still here? Waiting for my ride. I can get home myself. David glanced at his watch. It's past 11. Not safe for a woman alone. My ride will be here soon. I'll drop you off first. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Thanks, David. Call me David, he said gently, his gaze lingering. Amelia smiled and turned away, a shiver running through her as the night air chilled her. A jacket draped over her shoulders. David had taken off his coat. David, I'm fine. She reached to take it off, but he stopped her. Keep it. Don't catch a cold. Before she could protest, a voice interrupted. Excuse me, are you Mr. Miller? Yes. When they reached her apartment complex, Amelia turned to him. Thanks, David. Here's your jacket. She reminded herself that she was a married woman. She couldn't get too close to another man. Go on up. It's cold. He smiled. Goodbye. Amelia waved and headed towards her building. Inside, the lights were on. Ethan stood by the window, smoking. He turned, his eyes narrowed. Why are you so late? Amelia paused, then continued to the bedroom without a word. Ethan followed. She grabbed her pajamas and disappeared into the bathroom, closing the door in his face. Amelia, he called softly. Silence. Fatigue etched itself onto his face. He sighed. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have kept it from you. Maya's condition was serious. It couldn't wait. Still silence. He knew she'd hurt him. He rubbed his temples. Get some rest. I'm going back to the hospital to be with her. The door flew open. Amelia glared at him. You dare. Ethan smiled, pulling her into his arms. You weren't talking to me, so I had to. Do you think I'm being unreasonable? Her voice was muffled against his chest. No. My wife is the best. He kissed her softly and steered her towards the bathroom. Come on. What are you doing? Taking a shower. You go first. Together. The next morning, Amelia looked at Ethan over breakfast. What floor is she on? I'll visit her after work. What does she like to eat? I'll bring something. Ethan stared at her, surprised. 12th floor. I'm not sure what she likes. I'll figure something out. A flicker of something like triumph sparked in Amelia's chest. She needed to stake her claim. Ethan was hers. At work, as she ate lunch, David appeared, settling across from her. Amelia inwardly groaned. He was like a shadow these days. Same old food? David grimaced after taking a bite. What can you do? Still have to eat. There's better food out there. His gaze was intense. I'm a creature of habit. How do you know you won't like it if you don't try? His voice dropped, a double meaning hanging in the air. Amelia looked up, startled by the heat in his eyes. Was he flirting with her? Eat your lunch. It's getting cold. She looked down, finishing her food quickly and leaving without a word. That evening, Amelia went straight to the hospital, armed with fruit and flowers. As she reached Maya's room, she heard a woman's voice. Mom, I can't forget Ethan. I want to be with him. You have to help me. Amelia froze. Maya, he's married. He's happy. An older woman's voice replied. Happy? Ethan wants children. Why hasn't she given him any? If they were truly in love, they'd have a family by now. Not having children doesn't mean they aren't happy. Mom, after all these years with David, I realize I don't love him. And being with someone you don't love, it's not happiness. Maya, it's too late. Her mother sighed. No, Mom, help me. I want Ethan to divorce her and marry me. Maya, her mother sounded shocked. When Ethan came to get me, we were together. That's why David agreed to the divorce so quickly. Maya, he has a family. Even if he was with you, it was just a fling. You can't expect him to. What if I'm pregnant? Her mother gasped. No, Maya, you can't. Your heart, it can't handle the strain. Mom, those days we were together, it was my fertile time. And I took something to increase the chances. Maya, you planned this? From the beginning? Yes, Mom. I love him. I can't live without him. Leaving him to study abroad with David, it was the biggest mistake of my life. I regret it so much. Maya broke down, sobbing. Her mother held her close. Maya, you're my only daughter. Please, don't do anything rash. I'll help you. Amelia stood paralyzed, the fruit basket heavy in her hand. She felt as if she'd been struck by lightning. She didn't remember leaving the hospital. Back home, she sank onto the sofa, her phone buzzing with 5 missed calls from Ethan. Maya's words echoed in her mind, each one a sharp stab. Whether they had been together or not, the accusation of her infertility cut the deepest. The inability to give her husband a child was a constant source of pain. Children were the bond that held couples together. Even loveless marriages could be salvaged by the arrival of a child. But what about her and Ethan? Would their marriage crumble under the weight of their childlessness? She couldn't contain her grief any longer. Tears streamed down her face. The phone rang again. David's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, she couldn't place him. The ringing stopped, then started again. She took a deep breath and answered. David? Amelia, are you free? She hesitated. David, what's up? It's, well. Silence. Think of it as work. I'll pay you overtime. I really need your help. Okay. An hour later, Amelia found herself at David's house. You must be Amelia. David's mother greeted her warmly. Yes, Mrs. Miller. No wonder my son refuses to go on blind dates. He has such a beautiful girl by his side. Mrs. Miller beamed, holding her hand. David stood silently by. Amelia forced an awkward smile. What kind of situation had she gotten herself into? Playing the girlfriend of a single man while she herself was married. On the drive back, David tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. Amelia, thank you for tonight. Call me Amelia. He ignored her request. You were crying earlier. Something wrong? She'd put on heavy makeup to hide the evidence of her tears. Just irritated eyes. Too much eye drops. The excuse sounded lame even to her. Suddenly, David turned the car, heading in a different direction. Where are you going? Amelia asked, alarmed. Let's get a drink. It's late. I want to go home. Yes, it is late. Has your husband called? His question caught her off guard. At the bar, they found a quiet corner. David poured them each a glass of wine. Cheers, he said, raising his glass. They talked like old friends, sharing their stories, drinking more than they intended. She remembered him saying, "Life is too short to be tied down. Sometimes you have to let go, live a little. Don't let regrets haunt you." Amelia was slightly dazed. Only when his hand touched her face did the meaning of his words fully sink in. Her heart pounded. Could she? Should she? Maya's words flashed through her mind. But the alcohol, the emotional turmoil, David's touch, she let go. She woke up with a pounding headache. Sitting up in bed, she noticed something was different. She looked around the room, then down at her naked body under the covers. Horror washed over her. She'd slept with someone else. God, Amelia, what have you done? You're a married woman. Even if Ethan was entangled with his first love, this was betrayal. Her phone rang. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. Panic surged through her. She hesitated, then answered. Amelia, I won't be home for dinner. Eat without me. Oh, okay, she responded mechanically. Are you okay? You don't sound well. Car horns blared in the background. I'm fine. Are you outside? Yes. Maya's mother asked me to pick up a few things for her. Amelia's face hardened, the guilt momentarily receding. Will you be home tonight? Her voice was cold. Of course. You better. When have I ever lied to you? Ethan chuckled. Amelia bit her lip. Nothing. I'll hang up now. Okay. She fled the hotel, showered, changed, and went to work. David wasn't in his office. She sat at her desk, wondering how to talk to him. She was married. Last night was a mistake, fueled by alcohol and grief. She didn't see David all day. At the end of the day, she heard he'd gone on a business trip. Back home, Ethan still wasn't there. She curled up on the sofa, her chin resting on her knees. What would she do? Divorce? How could she face life alone, a woman unable to bear children? Who would want her? If she didn't divorce, how could they continue like this? Maybe he'd ask for a divorce. After all, his first love still wanted him, and they. She made a decision. No divorce. As long as she was his wife, they couldn't be together. Even if Maya had his child, it would be illegitimate. She went to bed, forcing herself to sleep. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't let it break her. She woke to a tickling sensation on her face. She brushed it away, then felt a warm, wet touch. She opened her eyes to see Ethan leaning over her, exhaustion etched on his features. Early night, he whispered, brushing her hair away from her ear. What time is it? 8:30. She'd only been asleep for half an hour. Didn't eat, did you? He asked. How did you know? Neither did I. He sat up. Amelia, I'm starving. He sounded almost pathetic. Amelia got out of bed, her voice flat. Didn't Maya's mother feed you? Are you jealous? Too sour. I don't like sour. She went to the kitchen and made them a simple meal. They ate in silence. They found a suitable donor for Maya. Surgery is next week. Once it's done, I can finally rest. And what about post-op care? Surely the lead surgeon can't just disappear. Her voice was icy. Ethan looked up, startled. Amelia quickly lowered her gaze, afraid of what she might say. A slow smile spread across his face. Is my wife unhappy with my performance? Amelia put down her chopsticks. Wash the dishes when you're done. She walked towards the bedroom. He caught her arm before she reached the door. No sleeping after dinner. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "Let me go." She struggled, but he held her tight. Amelia took a deep breath. "I went to the hospital today, to see Maya." He didn't react. She continued, her voice strangely calm. "I slept with someone else. After I heard what she said about you. I went to a bar." She hadn't expected to say it so calmly. Still, he didn't react. She struggled again. This time, he turned her around to face him. "I was there, Amelia. I saw you run out of the hospital. I followed you. You took a cab. I drove home." Ethan hadn't expected Maya to lie like that. Mrs. Thompson, her mother, was too kind to see through the deception. If it weren't for the debt he owed Mrs. Thompson for her kindness years ago, he wouldn't have gotten involved in Maya's affairs. He'd never truly loved Maya. He'd dated her out of obligation to Mrs. Thompson. He'd felt relieved when she left with David. Meeting Amelia had changed everything. He pursued her relentlessly, pouring all his love and devotion into their relationship. He knew she'd suffered trying to conceive for him, and it broke his heart. Children or not, as long as he had her, he was content. He'd intended to explain everything, but Mrs. Thompson called, panicked. Maya was having trouble breathing, at risk of going into shock. He rushed back to the hospital. It was past 10 when he finally left. As he was getting into his car, his phone rang. It was one of his interns. He'd seen Amelia at a bar, drunk, with a man who seemed to be taking advantage of her. Ethan drove straight to the bar. He saw the man, David, touching Amelia's face, whispering in her ear. He heard every word. He marched over and punched David in the face. People screamed. Someone threatened to call the police. David, stunned, got up and left without a word. Ethan carried Amelia out of the bar and to his car. She fumbled with the seatbelt, babbling incoherently. He took her to a nearby hotel. He couldn't drive with her like this. He'd never seen her drunk before. She was flushed, clingy, and surprisingly aggressive. She'd practically assaulted him. It was almost comical. His wife had a hidden wild side. By the end of his story, Amelia wanted to disappear. She was mortified even in front of her own husband. "You were quite enthusiastic," Ethan teased, a twinkle in his eye. She blushed, pushing him away. "I'm going to bed." "No sleeping after dinner." "Ethan, it's past 9. I have work tomorrow." "Wash the dishes." He settled onto the sofa and turned on the TV. She glared at him, then went to the kitchen. Back in the bedroom, she'd barely lain down when Ethan joined her. "I'm grateful to Mrs. Thompson, but that doesn't mean I condone Maya's behavior. If she tries to hurt you, I won't let her get away with it." Amelia looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Tears welled up. "Ethan," she whispered, "I've been so unreasonable. I didn't trust you." Ethan frowned. "You were acting out of love for me. But never doubt my love for you." He pulled her close and kissed her deeply. A week later, Ethan was waiting for her outside her office. "What are you doing here?" "Shouldn't you be with Maya?" she asked, surprised. "The surgery's off." "What? Did she?" Amelia's eyes widened. He chuckled, flicking her forehead lightly. "Don't be dramatic. Someone else is doing it." "Who?" Ethan was the best in his department. If he wasn't operating on Maya, it could only mean a former mentor. "He just returned from abroad. He's even better than me. I trust him with her." "Why aren't you doing it?" "I can't spend my life repaying favors. Some lines can't be crossed. Besides," he pinched her cheek, "if I keep indulging Maya, my wife might leave me." "Ethan. That's domestic abuse." She pushed him away and got into the car. As they drove off, Amelia saw David exiting the building. Did you really just punch him once that night? She asked casually. Why? Ethan glanced at David in the rearview mirror. Just curious. He resigned. Leaving next month. Guilty conscience. Amelia looked at Ethan, suspecting there was more to the story. Ethan smirked inwardly. Of course there was more. He'd made sure David's career at the company took a nosedive. His friend had business dealings with their company, making it easy to subtly sabotage David's projects. Later, Amelia heard Maya's surgery was a success. Mrs. Thompson had called, asking Ethan to visit, but he'd refused, using an excuse that left Mrs. Thompson speechless and put an end to her calls. Amelia had been watching TV when she overheard Ethan's excuse. She switched off the TV and stared at him. Are you crazy? You know I can't get pregnant. Why would you say that? Ethan put down his phone and smiled. I wasn't sure if you were or not. What? The fatigue, the nausea, the food aversions. Amelia froze. That doesn't necessarily mean. Ethan stood up and pulled a slip of paper from his briefcase. He handed it to her. Amelia saw the positive sign and burst into tears. I'm pregnant? I'm really pregnant? Yes, you are. And I'm going to be a dad. He sat beside her, wiping away her tears. You tricked me. I thought it was a routine checkup. It was. But your symptoms made me suspicious. So I added one more test. And I was right. That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. She shook Ethan awake in the middle of the night. Ethan, I'm pregnant. Ethan groaned and pulled her back down, tucking the covers around her. Go to sleep. You need rest. The baby needs rest. Oh, she lay still for a few minutes, then sat up again, about to speak. Ethan opened his eyes, looking at her expectantly. Go to sleep, Ethan. I'm going to sleep now too. She giggled and lay back down. My wife's going to be the death of me before this baby's even born, he muttered. You're so mean, she smiled and closed her eyes. 10 months later, their daughter was born. A wave of relief washed over Amelia. She finally had it all. A husband, a child, a complete family. She would cherish this hard-won happiness and live every moment to the fullest. The end.